The frozen wind tore at Olivia Preston's skirts as her boots slipped on the icy ledge, and she pressed herself against the rock face, realizing with horror that she was trapped 70 feet above the valley floor with no way down and a blizzard closing in fast. It was January 1878, and Olivia had come to Jefferson, Texas, 3 months earlier to work as a schoolteacher, leaving behind the crowded streets of Philadelphia for what she had imagined would be a gentler life. She had not anticipated the raw wilderness that surrounded the small town, nor the bitter winter that could descend even in Texas when the weather turned cruel. That morning, she had ridden out to deliver books to a homesteader's children who lived in the hills, but her horse had spooked at a mountain lion and thrown her. She had scrambled up the cliff face in panic, following what she thought was a trail, only to find herself stranded on this narrow ledge as the temperature dropped, and snow began to fall in thick, blinding sheets. Her fingers were already numb inside her thin gloves, and her traveling coat, suitable for Philadelphia winters, offered little protection against the savage cold that swept through these hills. She had been calling for help for over an hour, but her voice was growing hoarse and the wind seemed to swallow every sound. The light was fading fast, and Olivia knew that if she remained here through the night, she would freeze to death before dawn. She thought of her students, the eager faces of the children who looked forward to her lessons each day. She thought of her sister back in Philadelphia, who had begged her not to go west. She thought of all the things she had wanted to do with her life, and tears froze on her cheeks as she realized she might never get the chance. Then, through the howling wind, she heard something. A voice, distant but unmistakable, calling out words she could not quite make out. Hope surged through her chest. "Help!" she screamed, her voice cracking. "I am up here. Please help me." The voice came again, closer this time, and she could hear the sound of boots on stone. Someone was climbing toward her through the storm. Quinlan Norris had been tracking a wounded elk when he spotted the riderless horse wandering through the snow. The saddle was a lady's saddle, which meant trouble. He was a cattle rancher who had spent the last 5 years building up his spread in the hills outside Jefferson, and he knew these mountains better than most. He had learned to read the land during his years as a scout for cattle drives, and he could track anything that moved. The horse's tracks led him to the base of the cliff, and when he looked up through the swirling snow, he saw a figure in dark clothing pressed against the rock face high above. His heart kicked hard in his chest. Someone was trapped up there, and from the looks of the storm, they would not survive the night. Quinlan did not hesitate. He secured his horse and began to climb, his strong hands finding holds in the frozen rock. He was a tall man, broad through the shoulders from years of hard work, and he moved with the confidence of someone who had faced danger many times before. The wind tried to tear him from the cliff face, but he held on, pulling himself upward one handhold at a time. Ice cut his palms through his leather gloves, and the cold bit deep into his bones, but he kept climbing. "Hold on," he shouted upward. "I am coming." It took him 20 minutes to reach her, 20 minutes of brutal climbing through conditions that would have turned most men back. When he finally pulled himself onto the ledge beside her, he saw that she was shaking uncontrollably, her lips blue with cold. She was young, perhaps 23 or 24, with dark hair that had come loose from its pins and whipped around her pale face. Her eyes were wide with fear and relief. "Thank God," she whispered. "I thought I was going to die up here." "Not today," Quinlan said, his voice rough from the cold. He pulled off his heavy coat and wrapped it around her shoulders. "Can you move your fingers and toes?" "Barely," she said, her teeth chattering. "I cannot feel my feet." "We need to get you down quickly," he said. "The storm is getting worse." "Can you climb?" She looked down at the sheer drop below them and shook her head, terror flooding her features. I cannot. I tried, but I froze. I cannot do it. Quinlan assessed the situation quickly. The ledge was too narrow for them to wait out the storm, and she was already showing signs of severe cold exposure. If he did not get her down soon, she would lose consciousness, and then they would both die up here. All right, he said, making his decision. I am going to carry you down. That is impossible, she said, her voice shaking. You will fall. I have climbed worse, he said, though that was not entirely true. But you need to trust me. Can you do that? She looked into his eyes, and something passed between them in that moment. She saw the determination there, the quiet strength, and she nodded. Yes, she said. I trust you. Quinlan positioned himself carefully, then helped her onto his back. She wrapped her arms around his neck and her legs around his waist, and he could feel her trembling against him. She weighed almost nothing, but the added weight would make the descent treacherous. He tested each handhold carefully before committing his weight to it, moving with deliberate precision despite the wind that threatened to rip them both from the cliff face. What is your name? He asked as he climbed, trying to keep her conscious and calm. Olivia, she said against his ear. Olivia Preston. I teach at the school in Jefferson. I am Quinlan Norris, he said, finding another foothold. I have a ranch about 5 miles from town. Hold on tighter now. This next part is steep. She pressed her face against his shoulder, and he could feel her breath warm against his neck despite the cold. It took every ounce of his strength and skill to make that descent. Several times, rocks crumbled under his boots and he had to catch himself quickly, his muscles screaming with the effort of holding them both. The wind grew fiercer, and snow blinded him, but he kept moving, kept descending, driven by a fierce determination not to let this woman die. When his boots finally touched solid ground, he nearly collapsed with relief. But there was no time to rest. Olivia was barely conscious now, her grip on him weakening. He carried her to where his horse waited, then lifted her into the saddle and climbed up behind her, pulling her back against his chest and wrapping his arms around her to share his body heat. Stay with me, Olivia, he said as he urged his horse into motion. My ranch is not far. We are going to get you warm. The ride through the storm was a nightmare. The wind had picked up to a howl, and the snow was so thick he could barely see his horse's ears. But his mount was sure-footed and knew the way home. Quinlan kept Olivia upright in the saddle, talking to her constantly to keep her awake, though he was not sure she could hear him over the roar of the wind. By the time the dark shape of his ranch house emerged from the white fury of the storm, he could no longer feel his own hands or feet. He half-carried, half-dragged Olivia to the door and kicked it open, stumbling inside with her in his arms. The fire in the hearth had burned down to embers, but the house was still warmer than the brutal cold outside. He laid her on the rug in front of the fireplace and quickly built up the fire, his stiff fingers fumbling with the kindling. As soon as flames leaped up, he turned his attention to Olivia. Her lips were a frightening shade of blue, and her skin was ice-cold to the touch. He had seen men die of cold exposure before, and he knew she was in serious danger. Working quickly, he removed her wet boots and stockings, then wrapped her feet in blankets. He pulled off her soaked coat and outer layers, trying to maintain her modesty while getting her into dry clothing. He found one of his own flannel shirts and helped her into it, then wrapped her in every blanket he owned and positioned her close to the fire. For the next hour, he worked tirelessly to warm her. He heated water on the stove and made her drink warm broth, holding the cup to her lips when her hands shook too badly to hold it herself. He massaged her frozen hands and feet gently, trying to restore circulation without causing damage. Slowly, painfully, color began to return to her face, and her shivering, which had nearly stopped entirely, began again in earnest, which he knew was a good sign. "That is it," he encouraged her. "Your body is warming up. You are going to be all right." As the feeling returned to her extremities, she cried out in pain. "It hurts," she gasped. "My hands and feet, they burn." "I know," he said gently. "That means the blood is flowing again. It is a good thing, even though it does not feel like it." He sat beside her through the night, keeping the fire blazing and monitoring her condition. Outside, the storm raged with undiminished fury, and he knew they would be snowed in for at least a day or two. As the hours passed and the immediate danger faded, he found himself studying her face in the firelight. She was beautiful, with fine features and dark lashes that cast shadows on her pale cheeks. There was something about her that stirred something deep in his chest, something he had not felt in a long time. When dawn finally came, gray and dim through the snow-covered windows, Olivia opened her eyes fully for the first time since they had reached the house. She looked around the unfamiliar room, then at Quinlan, who sat in a chair beside her, his arms crossed over his chest. "You saved my life," she said, her voice hoarse but steady. "You would have done the same for me," he said, though they both knew that was not true. Few people would have risked what he had risked to save a stranger. "I do not know how to thank you," she said, tears welling in her eyes. "I thought I was going to die up there. I had given up hope." "You do not need to thank me," Quinlan said. "I am just glad I found you in time." She struggled to sit up, and he moved quickly to help her, propping pillows behind her back. She looked down at herself and realized she was wearing his shirt, and color flooded her cheeks. "I apologize for the impropriety," Quinlan said quickly. "Your clothes were soaking wet. I had to get you warm." "You have nothing to apologize for," she said. "You saved my life. I am not concerned with propriety under the circumstances." They looked at each other for a long moment, and something electric passed between them. Quinlan cleared his throat and stood up, suddenly uncomfortable with the intensity of the feeling. "Are you hungry?" he asked. "I can make breakfast." "Starving," she admitted. He cooked eggs and bacon, and they ate sitting in front of the fire while the storm continued to rage outside. As they ate, they talked. Olivia told him about growing up in Philadelphia, about losing both her parents to influenza 3 years earlier, about her decision to come west to start fresh. Quinlan told her about his life as a rancher, about the years he had spent driving cattle north before settling here in the Texas hills. He found himself telling her things he had never told anyone, and she listened with an intensity that made him feel truly heard for the first time in years. "You have built a good life here," she said, looking around the solid, well-built house. "You should be proud." "It is a lonely life sometimes," he admitted, surprising himself with the confession. "I have been so focused on building the ranch, I have not thought much about anything else." "I understand that," Olivia said softly. "I threw myself into teaching after my parents died. It was easier than facing the grief." They were quiet for a moment, the crackle of the fire the only sound in the room. "What were you doing out in those hills yesterday?" Quinlan asked. "It is dangerous country, especially in winter." "I was taking books to the Jennings children," she said. "They live too far from town to come to school regularly, so I ride out once a week to teach them. I should have paid more attention to the weather. The storm came up so fast." "The weather can turn on a dime out here," Quinlan said. "You were lucky I was nearby." "More than lucky," she said, meeting his eyes. "It was a miracle." The storm lasted 2 more days, and during that time, Quinlan and Olivia were trapped together in the ranch house. They talked for hours, learning about each other, sharing stories and dreams. Quinlan taught her to play poker with matchsticks as stakes, and she beat him 3 hands in a row, laughing at his expression of mock outrage. She helped him cook meals, and they discovered they worked well together in the kitchen, moving around each other with an easy rhythm that felt natural and right. On the second night, as they sat by the fire after dinner, Olivia said, "I have been thinking about what happened on that cliff. About how close I came to dying. It has made me realize how much time I have wasted being afraid." "Afraid of what?" Quinlan asked. "Of living, I suppose," she said. "After my parents died, I shut myself off from people. I told myself it was grief, but really, I was just afraid of losing anyone else I cared about, so I kept everyone at a distance." "That is understandable," Quinlan said. "Perhaps," she said, "but it is no way to live. These past 2 days, talking with you, laughing with you, I have felt more alive than I have felt in 3 years, and I realized that I do not want to go back to the way I was before." Quinlan felt his heart beating faster. "What do you want?" She turned to look at him, and the firelight danced in her eyes. "I want to feel. I want to take risks. I want to live fully, even if it means I might get hurt." He reached out and took her hand, and she did not pull away. Her fingers were warm now, fully recovered from the frostbite. They laced with his perfectly, as if they had been made to fit together. "I have not let myself care about anyone in a long time," Quinlan said. "After my brother died during a cattle drive 5 years ago, I threw myself into work and told myself that was enough. But it is not enough. I know that now." "What changed?" she asked softly. "I met a woman who was brave enough to trust a stranger with her life," he said. "A woman who makes me want to be braver myself." Olivia's breath caught in her throat. "Quinlan." He cupped her face gently with his hand, his thumb brushing across her cheekbone. "I know it has only been 2 days. I know it is too soon to feel what I am feeling. But when I was climbing down that cliff with you on my back, I knew that if anything happened to you, it would break something in me. And I have spent the last 2 days falling for you, Olivia Preston, and I cannot seem to stop." Tears spilled down her cheeks, and she smiled through them. "I have been falling for you too. From the moment you wrapped your coat around me on that ledge and told me you were going to carry me down, I knew you were someone special, someone worth taking a risk for." He kissed her then, gently at first, then with growing passion as she responded, her arms coming up to wrap around his neck. The fire crackled beside them, and outside the storm finally began to ease, but neither of them noticed. They were lost in each other, in the wonder of finding something neither had been looking for but both desperately needed. When they finally pulled apart, both breathless, Quinlan rested his forehead against hers. "Stay," he whispered. "Not just until the storm clears. Stay with me." "I have a life in town," she said. "My students, my job." "I know," he said, "and I am not asking you to give that up, but stay with me when you are not teaching. Let me court you properly. Give us a chance to see where this goes." She pulled back to look at him, her eyes searching his face. "You are serious." "I have never been more serious about anything in my life," he said. "I know it is fast. I know we have only just met, but I also know what I feel, and I do not want to let you go." A smile spread slowly across her face, radiant and full of joy. "Then I will stay. I will give us this chance." They kissed again, and this time it felt like a promise, like the beginning of something that would last far beyond the storm. The next morning dawned clear and bright, the storm finally blown out. The world outside was transformed, covered in a blanket of white that sparkled in the sunlight. Quinlan and Olivia stood on the porch, their hands clasped together, looking out at the beautiful, frozen landscape. "I need to get you back to town," Quinlan said reluctantly. "People will be worried about you." "I know," she said, "but I am not ready to leave yet." "You can come back," he promised. "Anytime you want. This is your home now too if you want it to be." She turned to him, her eyes shining. "I want it to be." They rode back to Jefferson together, Olivia sitting in front of Quinlan on his horse, wrapped in his arms. The journey took several hours through the deep snow, but neither of them minded. They were in no hurry to end their time together. When they reached town, there was indeed a commotion. A search party had been preparing to go out looking for Olivia as soon as the weather cleared. The relief on people's faces when they saw her was genuine and heartfelt. The town had grown to love their dedicated schoolteacher over the past 3 months. Olivia told them what had happened, how Quinlan had saved her life, and the way the townspeople looked at him changed. He had always been a bit of an outsider, a solitary rancher who came to town only when necessary, but now they saw him as a hero. He was uncomfortable with the attention, but Olivia squeezed his hand and smiled at him, and that made it bearable. Over the following weeks, Quinlan courted Olivia with a quiet intensity that took her breath away. He rode into town every Saturday to take her to dinner at the hotel restaurant, and they would talk late into the evening. He brought her books from the mail-order catalog, having noticed which topics interested her most. She visited his ranch every Sunday after church, and he taught her to ride properly so she would never again find herself in danger in the hills. The town watched their courtship with interest and approval. It was clear to everyone that Quinlan Norris and Olivia Preston were deeply in love, and the townspeople enjoyed seeing 2 lonely people find happiness together. In March, as spring began to green the hills, Quinlan took Olivia back to the cliff where he had found her. The ride up was easier now, with the snow melted and wildflowers beginning to bloom. They stood at the base of the cliff, looking up at the ledge where she had been trapped. "I have been thinking about this place," Quinlan said, "about how the worst day of your life led to the best thing in mine." "It is strange how life works," Olivia agreed. "If my horse had not thrown me, if I had not climbed up there, we might never have met." "I would have found you eventually," Quinlan said with certainty. "I believe that. Some things are meant to be." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. When he opened it, Olivia gasped. Inside was a ring, a simple gold band with a small diamond that caught the sunlight. "Olivia Preston," Quinlan said, dropping to one knee in the grass. "I know we have only known each other for 3 months. But I knew I loved you the moment I saw you on that ledge, and every day since then has only made me more certain. You have brought light and warmth and joy into my life, and I cannot imagine my future without you in it. Will you marry me?" Tears streamed down Olivia's face as she nodded emphatically. "Yes," she said, her voice breaking with emotion. "Yes, I will marry you, Quinlan Norris. I love you so much." He stood and slipped the ring onto her finger, then pulled her into his arms and kissed her as the spring breeze whispered through the new grass, and the birds sang in the trees around them. It was perfect, and it was theirs. They were married in May, in the small church in Jefferson. The whole town turned out for the wedding, eager to celebrate the couple who had found love in the midst of a winter storm. Olivia wore a dress of white lace that she had sewn herself, with tiny wildflowers woven into her dark hair. Quinlan wore his best suit, and when he saw her walking toward him down the aisle, his eyes filled with tears. The vows they spoke were traditional, but the emotion behind them was profound and real. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, and Quinlan kissed his bride, the congregation erupted in applause and cheers. The reception was held at the hotel, with music and dancing that lasted well into the night. Quinlan and Olivia danced together, oblivious to everyone else in the room, lost in their own world of happiness. Later, as they prepared to leave for the ranch, which would now be their home together, Olivia's closest friend from town, a fellow teacher named Margaret, pulled her aside. "I am so happy for you," Margaret said, hugging her tightly. "You deserve this happiness. "Thank you," Olivia said. "I feel like the luckiest woman in the world." "He is a good man," Margaret said. "Everyone can see how much he loves you." "I know," Olivia said softly. "Sometimes I still cannot believe this is real, that I found someone who sees me, truly sees me, and loves what he sees." "That is what we all hope for," Margaret said. "And you have found it. Hold on to it tightly." Olivia and Quinlan rode back to the ranch under a sky full of stars, their horses walking slowly, neither of them in any hurry. When they arrived home, Quinlan lifted Olivia down from her horse and carried her over the threshold, both of them laughing with joy. Their first year of marriage was a time of deep happiness and adjustment. Olivia continued to teach during the week, and Quinlan built her a study in the ranch house where she could prepare lessons and grade papers. On weekends, she helped him with the ranch work, learning to brand cattle and mend fences. They worked side by side, building not just a life but a true partnership. In the evenings, they would sit together on the porch, watching the sunset paint the hills in shades of gold and purple, and talk about their dreams for the future. Quinlan wanted to expand the ranch, and Olivia supported his ambitions wholeheartedly. She wanted to start a lending library in town, and he helped her organize fundraising efforts to make it happen. They learned each other's rhythms and moods, the little things that made each other happy or frustrated. They had their disagreements, as all couples do, but they never went to bed angry, always talking through their problems until they reached understanding. The foundation of trust that had been forged on that cliff face in the middle of a blizzard proved unshakable. In their second year of marriage, Olivia discovered she was pregnant. She told Quinlan one evening in June as they sat together watching fireflies dance across the meadow. He was overcome with emotion, pulling her into his arms and burying his face in her hair. "We are going to have a baby," he whispered, his voice thick with tears. "You are going to be a mother, and you are going to be a father," she said, laughing and crying at the same time. "Are you happy?" "Happy does not even begin to cover it," he said, pulling back to look at her face. "I am terrified and thrilled and grateful all at once. You have given me so much, Olivia, more than I ever dreamed possible." "You have given me just as much," she said. "You gave me my life, and then you gave me a reason to live it fully." The pregnancy was not easy. Olivia suffered from terrible morning sickness in the early months, and Quinlan hovered over her anxiously, trying to make her comfortable. She had to give up teaching temporarily, which was difficult for her, but the school board understood and promised to hold her position. As her belly grew round with their child, Quinlan became even more protective. He would not let her do any heavy work on the ranch, insisting she rest as much as possible. Sometimes she chafed at his overprotectiveness, but she also recognized it for what it was, an expression of how much he loved her and their unborn child. In February of 1880, exactly 2 years after Quinlan had rescued her from the cliff, Olivia went into labor. It was a long, difficult labor that lasted through the night and into the next day. Quinlan stayed by her side the entire time, holding her hand and wiping her brow, encouraging her when she was certain she could not go on. Finally, as the sun was setting, their son was born. He came into the world with a lusty cry that filled the house with sound and life. The midwife cleaned him and wrapped him in a blanket, then placed him in Olivia's arms. "He is perfect," Olivia breathed, tears streaming down her exhausted face. "Look at him, Quinlan. We made this perfect little person." Quinlan looked down at his son, at the tiny face and the small fists waving in the air, and felt his heart expand in his chest until he thought it might burst. "He is beautiful," he said, his voice rough with emotion, "just like his mother." They named him Nathan, after Quinlan's brother who had died on the cattle drive, and he became the center of their world. Quinlan proved to be a devoted father, getting up with Olivia in the night to help with feedings, rocking Nathan for hours when he was fussy, singing to him in a surprisingly gentle voice. As Nathan grew from infant to toddler, the ranch prospered. Quinlan's herd grew larger, and he hired 2 ranch hands to help with the work. Olivia returned to teaching part-time, and the lending library she had worked so hard to establish opened in Jefferson to great success. They had built a good life together, full of love and purpose and community. When Nathan was 2 years old, Olivia became pregnant again. This time, the pregnancy was easier, and she was able to continue teaching almost until her due date. Their daughter was born in September of 1882, a tiny, perfect little girl with her mother's dark hair and her father's blue eyes. They named her Grace because that was what she was to them, pure grace. With 2 young children, life on the ranch became busier and more chaotic, but also more joyful. The house was filled with laughter and the sound of little feet running across the wooden floors. Quinlan would come in from working the ranch to find Olivia surrounded by children, teaching Nathan his letters while Grace sat on her lap, and his heart would swell with love for his family. One evening when Nathan was 4 and Grace was 2, the family sat together on the porch watching the sunset. Nathan was chattering about a butterfly he had seen in the meadow, and Grace was asleep in Quinlan's arms. Olivia looked at her husband and smiled. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. "I am thinking about how different my life is from what I imagined," Quinlan said. "Before I met you, I thought I would spend my life alone, just me and the ranch. I thought that was enough. And now?" Olivia asked. "Now I cannot imagine that life," he said. "You and these children, you are everything to me. You are my whole world." "You saved my life on that cliff," Olivia said softly, "but you have done so much more than that. You have given me a life worth living. You have given me love and purpose and a family. You have given me everything I did not even know I needed." "We saved each other," Quinlan said, reaching out to take her hand. "That is what love does. It saves us and makes us whole." They sat together in the fading light, their children asleep, their hands clasped together, and felt the deep contentment of 2 people who had found exactly what they were meant to find in each other. The years passed, bringing both challenges and joys. There were hard winters and dry summers that tested the ranch. There were illnesses that frightened them and setbacks that discouraged them. But through it all, Quinlan and Olivia faced everything together, their love providing a firm foundation that could weather any storm. Nathan grew into a strong, capable boy who loved the ranch and dreamed of being a cowboy like his father. Grace was bright and curious, always asking questions and wanting to learn everything she could. Olivia continued to teach, inspiring generations of children in Jefferson, while Quinlan built the ranch into one of the most successful in the region. In 1886, when Nathan was 6 and Grace was 4, Olivia became pregnant once more. This pregnancy was a surprise, as they had thought their family was complete, but it was a welcome one. Their 3rd child, a son they named Samuel, was born in early 1887, bringing new energy and joy into their home. As their children grew, Quinlan and Olivia made sure to tell them the story of how their parents had met. The children never tired of hearing about the blizzard, the cliff, and the brave cowboy who had climbed through the storm to save their mother. It became a family legend, a story about courage and love and the way that sometimes the worst moments of our lives can lead to the best things. On their 10th wedding anniversary, in May of 1889, Quinlan took Olivia back to the cliff once more. It had become their tradition to visit the place where their story had begun on special occasions. The children stayed with friends in town, and Quinlan and Olivia rode out to the hills together, just the 2 of them. They stood at the base of the cliff, now thoroughly familiar to them both, and looked up at the ledge where Olivia had been trapped all those years ago. "You remember how scared you were?" Quinlan asked, his arm around her waist. "Terrified," Olivia said. "I truly thought I was going to die up there. And then I heard your voice calling through the storm, and I knew I had a chance. I remember seeing you up there and thinking I had never been more afraid in my life," Quinlan said. "Not for myself, but for you. A woman I did not even know yet, but somehow I knew I could not let anything happen to you." "Fate," Olivia said. "It had to be fate that you were there that day in those hills at exactly the right time." "I do not know if I believe in fate," Quinlan said. "But I do believe that some people are meant to find each other. And I was always meant to find you, Olivia. You are the other half of my heart." She turned in his arms and kissed him, and it was as passionate and full of love as their first kiss had been 10 years earlier. They had grown and changed together, but the fundamental connection between them had only grown stronger with time. As they rode back to the ranch that evening, Olivia said, "I want to write down our story. I want our children and their children to know how we met, how you saved me, how we fell in love. I want it preserved so it is never forgotten." "That is a wonderful idea," Quinlan said. "You should write it down. You have always had a gift for words." So Olivia began to write, spending her evenings after the children were in bed putting their story down on paper. She wrote about the fear and the cold, about Quinlan's bravery, and the way she had felt when he wrapped his coat around her. She wrote about falling in love during the storm, about their courtship and their wedding, about building a life and a family together. It took her months to finish, but when she was done, she had created something beautiful, a testament to their love and to the power of human connection. She read it to Quinlan one evening, and when she finished, he had tears in his eyes. "That is exactly how it was," he said. "You captured it perfectly. Our children will treasure this." "I hope so," Olivia said. "I want them to know that real love, lasting love, is possible. I want them to know that it is worth taking risks and being brave, because you never know what wonderful things might be waiting on the other side of fear." The children did treasure the story. As they grew older, they would ask their mother to read it aloud, and they would sit together as a family, remembering and celebrating the love that had brought them all into being. Nathan, as he matured, became very much like his father, steady and strong and deeply loyal. He took over more and more of the ranch work as Quinlan's hair began to gray, learning everything his father could teach him about cattle and land, and the hard work of making a life in the Texas hills. Grace inherited her mother's love of learning and her gift for teaching. She spent hours in her mother's study, reading every book she could get her hands on, and declared her intention to become a teacher herself when she grew up. Samuel, the youngest, was a charmer with an easy smile and a quick wit. He was the peacemaker among the siblings, always able to smooth over disagreements and make everyone laugh. He had his father's blue eyes and his mother's dark hair, and he was deeply loved by his entire family. As Quinlan and Olivia moved into their 40s, they found that their love had not diminished with time, but had instead deepened and matured into something even more precious than the passionate romance of their early years. They knew each other completely now, knew all the strengths and weaknesses, all the joys and sorrows, and they loved each other not despite these things but because of them. They had become true partners in every sense of the word, working together to manage the ranch and raise their children and contribute to their community. Olivia served on the school board, and Quinlan was elected to the town council. They were respected and admired throughout Jefferson, but they never forgot where they had come from or the struggles that had shaped them. In 1895, when Nathan was 15, he asked his father to tell him again about the day he had rescued Olivia from the cliff. They were working together in the barn, mending tack, and Quinlan paused in his work to look at his son. "Why do you want to hear that story again?" he asked. "You have heard it 100 times." "I know," Nathan said, "but I am older now and I understand it differently." "You risked your life to save a stranger. That took incredible courage." "It did not feel like courage at the time," Quinlan said. "It felt like something I had to do. When I saw her up on that ledge, I did not think about the danger. I just knew I had to reach her." "That is what courage is, though," Nathan said. "Doing what needs to be done even when you are afraid." Quinlan smiled at his son. "When did you get so wise?" "I learned from you," Nathan said simply. "You and Mother both. You have taught me what it means to be brave and to love deeply and to commit to something bigger than myself." Quinlan felt a lump form in his throat. "You are going to be a good man, Nathan. You already are." "I hope so," Nathan said. "I hope I can find what you and Mother have." "That kind of love seems rare." "It is rare," Quinlan agreed, "but it is worth waiting for. Do not settle for anything less than what your mother and I have. Wait for someone who makes you want to climb through storms, someone who makes you want to be better than you are." Nathan nodded seriously, taking his father's words to heart. That conversation stayed with Quinlan for days afterward. He realized that he and Olivia had given their children more than just a home and security. They had given them an example of what love could be, what marriage could be, and that was perhaps the greatest gift of all. The years continued to pass, bringing both celebrations and sorrows. Quinlan's father passed away in 1897, and Olivia's sister came to visit from Philadelphia, seeing for the first time the life her sister had built in Texas. The ranch continued to prosper, and the family's roots in Jefferson grew deeper. In 1900, as the new century dawned, Quinlan and Olivia celebrated their 25th wedding anniversary. Their children, now young adults, organized a party at the ranch, inviting everyone from town. The house was filled with food and music and laughter, and Quinlan and Olivia danced together under the stars just as they had at their wedding so many years before. 25 years, Olivia marveled as they swayed together to the music. "It seems impossible that so much time has passed." "The best 25 years of my life," Quinlan said. "Every single one of them." "Mine too," she said, resting her head on his shoulder. "I was thinking today about that girl who was trapped on the cliff, so scared and alone. I wish I could go back and tell her that everything was going to be all right, that the man climbing up through the storm to save her was going to give her the most beautiful life she could imagine." "She would not have believed you," Quinlan said with a smile. "Probably not," Olivia agreed. "But it would have been true nonetheless." As the party continued around them, their children watching with fond smiles, Quinlan and Olivia held each other close and gave thanks for the storm that had brought them together, for the courage that had saved them both, and for the love that had sustained them through a quarter-century of marriage. Nathan married a year later, a sweet-natured young woman named Rebecca who loved the ranch as much as he did. They built a house on the far edge of the property, and Nathan began to truly take over the day-to-day operations of the ranch. Quinlan was proud of his son and grateful to be able to step back a bit from the hard physical labor that was becoming more difficult as he aged. Grace went to Dallas to attend a teacher's college, fulfilling her dream of following in her mother's footsteps. She wrote home regularly, her letters filled with enthusiasm for her studies and her plans for the future. She wanted to return to Jefferson to teach after graduation, to give back to the community that had nurtured her. Samuel, ever the charmer, talked about traveling, about seeing more of the world before settling down. Quinlan and Olivia encouraged him to follow his dreams, knowing that he would eventually come home when he was ready. In 1904, Nathan and Rebecca presented Quinlan and Olivia with their first grandchild, a little girl they named Lily. Holding his granddaughter for the first time, Quinlan felt a wave of emotion so powerful it nearly brought him to his knees. This tiny person represented the continuation of the love story that had begun on a cliff in a blizzard 26 years earlier. "She is perfect," he whispered to Olivia as they sat together on the porch, the baby sleeping peacefully in his arms. "She is our legacy," Olivia said softly. "All of our love, all of the life we have built together, continues in her and in all the children who will come after." More grandchildren followed. Nathan and Rebecca had 2 more children, and when Grace returned to Jefferson after finishing school, she met and married a young doctor who had recently set up practice in town. They had 3 children of their own. Even Samuel eventually came home from his travels, married a woman he had met in San Antonio, and started a business in Jefferson, giving Quinlan and Olivia 2 more grandchildren to spoil. As Quinlan and Olivia moved into their 60s, they found themselves surrounded by family, their house often filled with children and grandchildren who came to visit. The ranch that had once been so quiet and lonely was now alive with noise and laughter and love. They had built something lasting, something that would endure long after they were gone. On a cold January day in 1908, 30 years to the day after Quinlan had rescued Olivia from the cliff, they took one final trip to that sacred spot. They were older now, their hair gray, their faces lined with age, but their love was as strong as ever. They stood hand in hand at the base of the cliff, looking up at the ledge where their story had begun. 30 years, Quinlan said, shaking his head in wonder. "When I climbed up there to get you, I never imagined we would be standing here 3 decades later, looking back on a lifetime together." "The best lifetime," Olivia said, squeezing his hand. "Every moment of joy, every challenge we have faced, every child and grandchild we have been blessed with, all of it flows from that day." "I would do it again," Quinlan said. "I would climb that cliff 1,000 times if it meant finding you." "I know you would," Olivia said, turning to face him. "That is who you are. That is who you have always been. My hero, my partner, my great love." They kissed there at the base of the cliff, a kiss full of history and memory and enduring devotion. When they finally pulled apart, both had tears in their eyes. "Let us go home," Olivia said. "Our family will be arriving soon for dinner." They rode back to the ranch, their horses walking slowly through the winter landscape. Smoke rose from the chimney of the house, and as they approached, they could see their children and grandchildren beginning to arrive, coming together to celebrate the anniversary of the day that had changed everything. That evening, surrounded by 3 generations of family, Quinlan and Olivia told the story one more time. The grandchildren listened with wide eyes as their grandfather described climbing the cliff through the blizzard, as their grandmother told them about the fear and the cold, and the moment she knew she was going to survive. "And then, what happened?" little Lily asked, even though she had heard the story many times before. "Then we fell in love," Olivia said simply. "We built this ranch and this family, and we have spent every day since then grateful for the storm that brought us together." "That is the most romantic story ever," one of the older granddaughters sighed. "It is a true story," Quinlan said. "And the most important thing I want you all to remember is this: love is worth fighting for. It is worth taking risks for. Your grandmother and I have had 30 wonderful years together, because we were brave enough to reach for something extraordinary." The family celebrated late into the evening, and when everyone had finally gone home and the house was quiet again, Quinlan and Olivia sat together by the fire, just as they had done on so many nights over the past 3 decades. "We have lived a good life," Olivia said, her head resting on Quinlan's shoulder. "The very best life," he agreed. "I would not change a single thing." "Neither would I," she said. "Being trapped on that cliff was the luckiest thing that ever happened to me because it brought me to you." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the flames dance in the fireplace, both lost in memories of all the years they had shared. Outside, the winter wind whispered through the trees, but inside they were warm and safe, surrounded by the life they had built together. As the fire burned down to embers, Quinlan helped Olivia to her feet, and they walked together to their bedroom, their steps slow but steady. They had grown old together, their bodies marked by time and hard work, but their hearts were as young as they had been on that cold January day when a cowboy had climbed through a storm to save a schoolteacher trapped on a cliff. They lay together in the darkness, Olivia tucked into Quinlan's side just as she had been on so many thousands of nights before. "I love you," she whispered. "Today, tomorrow, and forever." "I love you too," he replied. "My brave, beautiful Olivia, you are the best thing that ever happened to me." They fell asleep together, secure in the knowledge that they had found something rare and precious, a love that had weathered every storm and emerged stronger for it. Their story, the story of a cowboy who had risked everything to save a stranger and the love that had blossomed from that act of courage, would be told and retold by their descendants for generations to come, a testament to the power of bravery, devotion, and the unbreakable bonds of true love. The years that followed were peaceful ones. Quinlan and Olivia continued to live on the ranch, though Nathan had fully taken over its management. They spent their days surrounded by family, playing with grandchildren, tending Olivia's garden, and enjoying the quiet contentment of a life well lived. On warm summer evenings, they would sit on the porch and watch the sunset paint the hills in shades of gold and purple, just as they had done for decades. They would hold hands and talk about the past, sharing memories and laughing over old stories. Sometimes they would sit in comfortable silence, needing no words to communicate the depth of their love and connection. Their health remained relatively good well into their 70s, a blessing they never took for granted. Quinlan's joints ached from years of ranch work, and Olivia's eyesight had weakened, but these were minor inconveniences in the face of all they still had. They woke up each morning grateful for another day together, another day to see their family flourish, another day to love each other. In the spring of 1915, the family gathered to celebrate Quinlan's 75th birthday. The ranch was filled with children, grandchildren, and even a few great-grandchildren now. There was food and music and laughter, and Quinlan found himself overwhelmed with gratitude for the abundance of blessings in his life. Nathan stood up to make a toast, raising his glass high. "To my father, the bravest man I have ever known. The man who taught me what it means to work hard, to love deeply, and to always do the right thing no matter the cost. Thank you for everything you have given us, not just the ranch and the security, but the example of how to live a good life. Happy birthday, Father." Everyone raised their glasses and cheered, and Quinlan felt tears streaming down his weathered face. Olivia reached over and squeezed his hand, her eyes also wet with tears. "We did well," she whispered to him. "Look at what we created." "We did more than well," he whispered back. "We created something beautiful." As the years continued to pass, Quinlan and Olivia knew they were approaching the end of their journey together. They talked about it sometimes, late at night when they could not sleep, holding each other close and trying not to think about a world where one of them existed without the other. "I do not want to live without you," Olivia confessed one night, her voice thick with tears. "I cannot imagine it." "I feel the same way," Quinlan said, stroking her hair gently. "But we both know that day will come eventually. All we can do is be grateful for every moment we have had together and trust that our love is strong enough to transcend even death." "Do you really believe that?" she asked. "That love continues after death. I have to believe it," he said. "Because I cannot accept that what we have, this extraordinary love we have built together, could ever truly end. Maybe our bodies will fail, but our souls, our love, that is eternal." She turned to kiss him then, and it was tender and sweet and full of all the love they had shared over nearly 4 decades of marriage. In the autumn of 1918, Olivia caught a bad cold that settled in her chest. Despite the doctor's best efforts, it developed into pneumonia. For 2 weeks, Quinlan sat by her bedside, holding her hand, reading to her, telling her stories of their life together. Their children and grandchildren came to visit, and Olivia smiled at each one, telling them she loved them, making sure they knew how proud she was of the people they had become. But it was Quinlan she held on to, Quinlan whose hand she would not release. "I am not ready to leave you," she whispered one evening as the light faded from the sky. "I know," he said, his voice breaking. "I am not ready for you to go either. But if you need to rest, if you are tired, it is all right. I will be all right. Our children will take care of me. Promise me something," she said, struggling to breathe. "Anything," he said. "Promise me you will not give up after I am gone. Promise me you will keep living, keep enjoying the family we built together. Promise me you will tell our great-grandchildren about the day you climbed through the storm to save me." "I promise," he said, tears streaming down his face. "But you are not leaving me yet. You are going to fight this and get better." She smiled at him, a sad, knowing smile. "My brave cowboy, still trying to save me." "Always," he said. "I will always try to save you, but this was one battle even Quinlan could not win." 3 days later, surrounded by her family, Olivia took her last breath. Quinlan was holding her hand, and he felt the moment her spirit left her body. The grief that washed over him was like nothing he had ever experienced, a physical pain that made it hard to breathe. "I love you," he whispered to her still form. "I will love you forever." The funeral was held at the church in Jefferson, and it seemed the entire town turned out to pay their respects to the beloved teacher who had touched so many lives. People spoke about her kindness, her dedication to education, her warm smile and generous heart. But it was Quinlan who gave the final eulogy, standing at the front of the church with his children surrounding him for support. "My wife was the bravest person I ever knew," he said, his voice steady despite the tears that flowed freely down his face. "Not because she faced danger without fear, but because she chose to live fully despite her fears. She chose to love deeply, even though love means risking loss. She chose to give herself completely to her family, her students, her community. And in doing so, she made the world a brighter, better place. I was blessed beyond measure to be her husband for 40 years, and I will carry her love with me for whatever time I have left." After the funeral, Quinlan returned to the ranch, but it felt empty without Olivia. Everything reminded him of her, her chair by the fireplace, her books in the study, her flowers in the garden. For weeks, he struggled with the grief, wondering how he was supposed to go on without the woman who had been the center of his world for 4 decades. But he had made her a promise, and Quinlan Norris was a man who kept his promises. Slowly, painfully, he began to rebuild his life without her. His children visited often, and his grandchildren came to sit with him on the porch and listen to his stories. He found comfort in talking about Olivia, in keeping her memory alive through the stories he told. He kept his promise to tell the great-grandchildren about the day he had climbed through the storm. He would gather them around and describe the blizzard, the cliff, the terrifying descent with Olivia on his back. and he would tell them about falling in love during the days they were snowed in together, about how he had known from the very beginning that she was the one person he wanted to spend his life with. "Your great-grandmother was my miracle," he would tell them. "She saved me just as surely as I saved her. Before I met her, I was just going through the motions of living, but she taught me how to truly live, how to love, how to be part of something larger than myself. And every day I had with her was a gift." Quinlan lived for another 3 years after Olivia's death, 3 years in which he remained active and engaged with his family despite his grief. He saw his grandchildren marry and start families of their own. He held new great-grandchildren and told them about the woman they would never meet, but whose legacy lived on in all of them. On a cold January morning in 1922, exactly 44 years after he had climbed through a blizzard to save a schoolteacher trapped on a cliff, Quinlan passed away peacefully in his sleep. His children found him in his bed, a smile on his face, his hand outstretched as if reaching for someone only he could see. They buried him beside Olivia in the Jefferson Cemetery, beneath a simple headstone that bore both their names and the dates of their lives. But the true monument to their love was not made of stone. It was the thriving ranch that still bore their mark, the dozens of descendants who carried their legacy forward, the story that would be told and retold for generations. The story of a cowboy who had risked everything to save a stranger in a storm, and the love that had blossomed from that act of courage. A love that had weathered every challenge, celebrated every joy, and built something lasting and beautiful. A love that had truly been worth climbing through a storm for. And in the hearts of their descendants, Quinlan and Olivia lived on, forever young, forever in love, forever the couple who had proven that true love, brave love, is the most powerful force in the world.